So this is going to be a very interesting video, I would hope so. I've always liked how in Steel Ball Run it's supposed to be a parallel to parts 1, 2, and 3 to a certain degree, and I really do like that when the ideas kind of cross over or you try to mix and match them around. A big idea of this that I really do like is the idea of swapping Hamon and Spin around, seeing if Spin, at least in parts 1 and 2, can really survive against the likes of the Pillarmen and the vampires within those parts. So to start off, what is the Spin? What can it do? Because this is probably the biggest thing I need to answer before I get into like the whole video / argument part. Gyro states the idea of the steel balls and the Spin are in the pursuit of infinity by the Zeppeli family in the Steel Ball Run universe, for the purpose of execution and medicine among their family, for the Kingdom of Naples. How they obtain this power is by the golden rectangle, a ratio of 9:16. The ratio is basically found everywhere in life. It's even in art, nature, it's everywhere. It's really weird how the universe chooses this really specific ratio for everything in life. By spinning in the specific ratio of 9:16 with the steel balls that are perfectly symmetrical, the Zeppelis are able to unlock a really unique power called the Spin. Now, what does it exactly do, as this is probably what you're wondering? Well, the Spin is able to basically manipulate the human body to an extremely high level. You see, all the Zeppelis that actually use the steel balls and the Spin have an extremely deep knowledge of the human body, basically making them surgeons or doctors, giving them the knowledge and powers to basically freely manipulate the human body to an extremely high level, as there is a lots of showings of just Gyro himself manipulating the human body to ways and degrees I don't think a steel ball really should, but of course this is JoJo and a unique power system, so of course it's able to do a lot of wacky shit. Note, I won't be going over all the abilities, as for this video I'm just really trying to stick to the more combat oriented ones. If you really want a more in-depth idea or like guide on how the Spin works, I've made videos on that in the past that are still pretty up to date and are really good, so if you want to go check those out, go freely do that. Anyway, back to the steel balls. They're busted as fuck. With an early Steel Ball Run, Gyro uses his steel balls to mainly redirect damage opponents, or enhance his body to a high level, basically making it invulnerable for a short amount of time. At a casual level, the steel balls can be used to destroy rock or even stone, pretty effortlessly, by the way. And these aren't high level techniques. Gyro is doing this stuff pretty casually in the beginning of the race, and is just like meh, child's play basically, as he is a master Spin user. As the part continues forward, we see that the Spin can do a lot more than just body manipulate, as it's basically able to manipulate anything really, as there are multiple parts in Steel Ball Run where the steel ball is able to carve out stone or manipulating metal into becoming bullets to fire off, and making wood turn into ropes in some cases. Like, the steel balls can do a lot more than just manipulate the human body. They're basically able to manipulate anything in the golden rectangle. So at the bare basics of the Spin, you can manipulate others, manipulate objects and things around you with the Spin, manipulate yourself to a degree to make yourself invulnerable to bullets, and a whole other trove of abilities shown in Steel Ball Run, but of course I'm just trying to pick out the more combat oriented ones. Due to the base nature of the steel balls being balls, you can throw them, meaning that most, if not all, Spin users are ranged based, meaning that you do have advantage over close combat characters. And that's really the basics for the Zeppeli's steel balls. But of course there is another, Licapipo and his wrecking balls, courtesy from the Royal Guards of Naples. These wrecking balls are a highly specialized and aggressive version of the steel balls for more combat oriented scenarios. The two major differences between the wrecking balls and the steel balls are the fact that the wrecking balls have these smaller balls on top of the big ball that kind of just spin off of it, colliding into objects around it, causing some extra damage that the main ball probably wouldn't be able to do. But if these smaller balls, aka satellites, were to miss its target, they have a very special effect that if they kind of were in your direction and they miss you, they kind of cause this hemispherical neglect on the left side of your body, allowing Licapipo or any wrecking ball user to reposition themselves / get closer to the opponent if needed. So here's a weird part about the wrecking balls that I don't think a lot of people discuss, but I will bring up here. It is never stated that the wrecking balls can't do / replicate anything the steel balls can. So what I'm trying to say here is they're really just the same thing, except the wrecking balls just have a bit of extra combat sauce to it. It is never stated by Licapipo or Gyro that the wrecking balls are weaker in terms of the abilities it can do compared to the steel balls. If anything, they're at the same level, if not a bit stronger, due to the fact that it just has a lot more abilities. Take it as you will, but basically in hindsight, the Spin is able to make both these steel balls ridiculously overpowered. But ooh boy does it get better. Enter the golden Spin or the super Spin. Gyro states in a silent way, if you spin your steel ball ball within the ratio perfectly, you can achieve the golden spin, or the super spin. This is achieved by looking at reference in real life or nature to achieve this power up. This spin giving birth to a much powerful rotation and the ability to enter an infinite amount of energy when spinning your steel balls / wrecking balls, if Wicked People actually is able to do this. So basically meaning that all previous abilities I just talked about in this video get enhanced to a infinite degree, but it does have a weakness. If the user is not able to reference anything in nature, they can't do the golden spin correctly. And in combination of using this spin technique with a horse allows access to an even crazier world of power. Gyro speculates by using the rotational energy of a horse in combination with his steel ball, using the golden spin technique might allow them to access a level of spin power unseen at the time. And Gyro would be correct. By doing all of this, he'd be able to throw his steel ball, making Ball Breaker, a visualization of a stand within the steel ball to attack Funny Valentine's Love Train's light barrier. A barrier that sent any misfortune its way into a different place / time period, as no normal attacks would be able to affect D4C Love Train, until Ball Breaker, a visualization of the stand with an almost infinite amount of energy, would pierce the barrier and severely injure Funny Valentine, and also kind of age him, as apparently the energy is so powerful it just ages people. Apparently that's a thing it does. But a thing to note that Gyro and his horse never fully utilize Ball Breaker to 100% efficiency, as Lucy would break up the rhythm of the horse and him, and making an imperfection in the ball itself because Love Train shenanigans. So we never really saw the full utilization of Ball Breaker within Steel Ball Run, leaving its full true power up to speculation. Plus, one downside of the ability, it is extremely hard to set up, as there are a lot of things that you need to do to even get this ability to proc / activate. High risk, high reward mentality when it comes to Ball Breaker. And that's it for all the spins techniques when at least it comes to combat, and for this video that I think are at least appropriate for the matchup. So when it comes to the spin versus the vampire, how do I think this matchup could play out? Note, I'm not trying to make it a specific character versus another specific character from part 1, just a generalization of the spin versus vampiricism. In my opinion, I do think the spin would act fairly well, and it probably would beat a vampire in a fight. There are a lot of factors to this idea, but I do think the primary one is the body manipulation the spin can do with the steel balls. It is said in part 2 by Joseph the 3 weeks to kill a vampire are Hamon, the sun, and completely destroying its brain. There are multiple cases of just the spin itself in its most basic form in early Steel Ball Run being able to destroy stone and other material, basically breaking it down into other objects for other uses. The idea the steel ball could unravel / slowly destroy a vampire slowly in the most basic spin art is not too far-fetched. Plus, they do share some human-esque body similarities, except for the whole regeneration and full body manipulation they have, so they still could be subject to being affected by the steel ball. Plus, this is a range versus a close range type of fight, so the steel balls do have a natural advantage over the vampire. But I will say this, the spin user isn't really crazy themselves. They're basically human, they just have a steel ball that allows them to do unique stuff. So if they really do get touched by the vampire at all, it's basically almost game over unless they have another steel ball in their pocket for close range usage. But what happens when a spin user fights a vampire with their full kit? The super speed, the super strength, the regeneration at a high level, the stringy space laser eyes, and the freezing touch. Surprisingly, at least in my opinion, I don't think it changes that much. The only issue here would be probably the ice touch, and I think that could get bypassed around by using the super spin / the spin in the golden rectangle. I just don't think it would change. The spin's nature of getting to this infinite amount of energy, being able to manipulate a vampire's body and eventually destroying their head, just seems a lot more likely than a vampire trying to get close to the spin user, as the spin user is naturally a range user and wouldn't want to get close to them whatsoever. And even if the vampire did get close, the spin user of course can enhance their body to protect themselves from the vampire, and those abilities would possibly be enhanced because of the golden spin, if they have another steel ball of course. And note, that's just with the Zeppeli steel ball. I actually think it gets a lot worse with just the wrecking ball by itself without the golden spin versus a extremely powerful vampire like, I don't know, let's say Dio or Straizo. The wrecking balls are quite literally meant for combat alone and are specialized for it. The little satellites themselves would cause disorientation to the left side of the vampire's brain, and the satellites would provide extra damage for the wrecking ball user. On top of the fact, the wrecking ball is shown to at least be more used for headshots rather than the steel ball just being kind of used everywhere on the body. And then you add the super spin to the wrecking ball, and then it just ends up being a very, very bad time for a vampire. Note, I do think a vampire can beat a spin user if they don't know what they're doing / they don't know the weaknesses in their head, but it would be extremely difficult to get around a person that can manipulate your body from long range. So I would confidently say during part 1, a spin user with a steel ball or a wrecking ball could fight vampires and even stronger vampires in part 1 Phantom Blood. Pretty well, I would think. But now entering part 2 Battle Tendency and their Pillarmen, this is where it gets really, really rough and really, really weird. To give a brief overview of the Pillarmen in this part are monstrously stronger compared to the vampires in part 1. Like, they quite literally are compared to be above them on a food chain. They have very similar abilities to a vampire, but all of them are massively amped and are extremely powerful, having a body manipulation severely above a vampire to the point where they can just break down their body to the point where they don't even look like a thing anymore. Their intelligence is on a whole different caliber, able to literally learn an entire language in a very, very short amount of time. Strength on par with the vampire / even surpassing that casually, depending on the Pillarman, having super speed far above even that of a vampire, and being able to basically absorb anything that comes in contact with them that is a living organism. Not to mention their durability is insane, and that's just their basic powers, as all 3 Pillarmen are more unique than the last, having their own modes. And to add insult to injury, there is the implication that you probably might need Hamon / the Sun to beat these guys only, as the only other way to actually beat these guys is to completely atomize them, as AC/DC has been shown to literally just be a brain and survive. So could Spin beat these guys with all these powers and abilities? Newsflash, no. While the Spin can body manipulate these guys, probably, it wouldn't really matter, as they are able to manipulate their bodies to an even higher degree than a vampires. So I would think they'd actually be able to at least negate the actual Spin's ability to do that to themselves, as their powers are at least a lot more complex than a vampire's. Not to mention, pretty big factor here, the Pillarmen are extremely smart, and they would very, very, very quickly figure out, oh, they're weak, and their only big thing to claim here is that they know how to use a ball. The Spin is not that hard to learn. Johnny was able to learn it under a week, a few days even. A Pillarman would figure that out in moments and would be able to adjust accordingly to the Spin user's fighting style. Their intelligence is a major factor here, and I'm not even talking about their other abilities yet, or even their base stats. Their absorption and super speed are pretty crucial here, as they would probably just use both of those just to completely manhandle any Spin user. And while yes, Pillarmen do not regenerate, they'd probably get hit once or twice by the steel ball and then realize, oh, I know how it works, I'm not going to get hit by it again. And that's kind of the end of the story. And to mention again, since it's not Hamon, it quite literally could just bounce off of them. I'm just saying that. But you're probably saying, metas, what about the golden spin, the super spin, and the wrecking balls? I'm going to be honest right now, it doesn't matter. None of those abilities are going to work on them. Even if the golden spin amps a steel ball or a wrecking ball, it's going to hit the Pillarmen, it might affect them, might not, and then they're just going to adapt around it. That's it. It's not going to work. And the whole like hemispherical neglect that the wrecking balls can do might not affect them, maybe, because they're not really human. And I just don't think the wrecking balls and steel balls just have the AP to really even damage these guys, even if they could affect them. It's just not enough to beat the Pillarmen. I'm just saying that now. They quite literally are too tough and can survive just being a literal brain. But there is one last saving grace, being Ballbreaker versus the Pillarmen. How would Ballbreaker affect these guys? At an imperfect state, Ballbreaker was still able to break through D4C Love Train's light barrier, a barrier that can shoot across time and space to deflect damage, and got through that defense. It can also passively affect your body, slowly aging you. While this ability probably wouldn't work on a Pillarman because they don't age, it just shows shows that it has a lot of energy coursing through it. So what would a ball breaker at 100% efficiency / perfection look like? Well, thankfully, thanks to Funny Valentine, he does compare ball breaker and Tusk Act 4, saying they are slightly different just because, well, one is perfected and the other one isn't. And the other one is actually a stand, not the visualization of a stand. I would assume here there is no infinite rotation shenanigans because that might be just in specific with Tusk Act 4, but maybe with ball breaker, it just hits you with an infinite amount of energy, maybe, or something, or like slowly makes you into dust because there was that whole aging effect thing. So I don't really know what it could do at full power. I'm just assuming it's just gonna hit you with a lot of energy, basically. Possibly killing a Pillarman, maybe. And why I say that is because it requires a lot of things to build up to ball breaker, and if a Pillarman were to interrupt that rhythm to ball breaker, it'd basically be useless, leading back to the previous scenario of the Pillarman just winning. So I would say here that it is likely for a Pillarman to be defeated by ball breaker, but if it's just a regular spin, no. I don't think it would be enough to defeat a Pillarman. So when it comes to the spin versus vampiricism and Pillarman, I do think vampires can be beat by a spin user pretty casually, or at least on a very high level. It would probably take a pretty good amount of spin knowledge and spin power to actually beat a vampire. With a Pillarman though, nah, it's not happening. Pillarmen are just way too much. They're way too durable and way too smart. It's a maybe on the ball breaker side. I don't really know what a full power ball breaker could do against a Pillarman, but if it's anything like I said, then it's a probability. It's just the startup with the horse that could be interrupted by the Pillarman is my one thing that makes me think that the Pillarman would just end up beating the spin user, most likely even if they were to use their strongest technique against them, leading me to think that the Pillarman would just win overall. Well, that's going to be the end of the video. Like, comment, share, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, stay hydrated. See you in the next one, ladies and gentlemen.